speaker who is a longtime member of the 5D group here. He's a home group member who's been here for quite a while, and his name is Matt. Matt, can you unmute yourself and share your story?
Hey everybody, my name is Matt and I'm an alcoholic.
Boop, Matt.
Did you say move? I'm kidding. No, I'm fine. Don't respond. I'm good. Hello everyone. Welcome to our meeting. We're glad you're here, and I know I just spoke recently, so sorry for anybody who heard my talk fairly recently. So yeah, I'm from St. Louis, so they give a lot of talks in St. Louis. It's like a meeting town where they give talks, and I'm really unpolished these days because I live in Florida now, and I lived in the South for a while, and they don't have speaker meetings there really, or at least not like we did in St. Louis. So it's funny. Anyways, so where do I start? I guess people usually start at their first drink, right? I don't remember which drink was my first drink, but I remember I enjoyed it. And I think that's all that's really important, because that's why I drink, is because I enjoy it a lot. So much that when I have one drink, I forget that it's not acceptable to have another one, or another one, and another one, and another one. And I just can't do it. And like, so when I have one drink, I don't know what's going to happen. Like, I don't know how much I'm going to drink. I don't know if I might take some pills that someone hands me. I don't know if I might drive, which is something I always said that I would never do. And that's what happens when I have a drink. And I didn't know that for a really long time. I had a lot of fun in college. I didn't start drinking until I was 18. I went away to college, and I was so when I was in grade school, a kid that I carpooled with, he was killed by a drunk driver on a field trip, actually. And it was really traumatic for me. And I like made a promise never to drink and drive. And then when I started drinking, I did it fairly quickly. And that's something that I had always promised that I would never do. And I just did it. And that's what happened when I drank. So anyways, I'm dating this guy, right? And they break up with me because, you know, I don't know why, but they break up with me, and I'm torn apart. And we dated for 2 months, which was, you know, it's quite a long time. And I was very upset. And, you know, I hated him for years. And that's when I started drinking, because my friends were like, oh, come drink with us. And I was just like, okay, fine, because I was so distraught. But I hated that person for like I hated that person until I got sober. I don't know how many years it was. It was probably about 5 years. And that's the kind of person that I was. And I wasn't just like, I hate you. I was like, I'm gonna get some gasoline and pour it on your car and light a match. Kind of hateful person. And it's bad, because that's the way that I was with everyone. That's just how I was. I hated anybody that I'd ever met. So yeah, we got some lovely people in the chat. Just lovely, lovely people. Anyways, so I drank, and things got crazy, and my life fell apart, essentially. It took a long time, though. It was slow. It was a slow movement into darkness. I'm so distracted. I'm sorry, guys. It's that freaking chat. Let's just turn the chat off. I'll do that. Look at that. No one. Now no one can chat anymore. We'll turn it back on.
Why don't you let the tech host do that?
I'm sorry. It was so distracting. I couldn't help myself. All right, guys. So I made really bad life choices when I was drinking. My friends told me that they weren't going. So I was going to move in with my friends. And they told me that I made 2 risky life decisions to live with me. And this was like 3 months into my drinking. They had decided that my lifestyle was too high risk to share a living habitat. I found a roommate after that, and she was like the coolest person ever. This is like in college. And I hated her too, because, I mean, I don't know why I hated her. I just did. And she took care of me. Like, she would clean up after me. She was the coolest person ever. And when we stopped living together, I was like, fuck that person. They need to just die. Because that's the kind of person that I was. I was a really hateful, mean person. Like, so when I got sober, right, and you're working, and I'm jumping around, but when you do your 4-step right, my sponsor, we did one column at a time instead of each row at a time. So we would start with names. So I'd write all my names, and then we'd start with, you know, the whatever I'm mad about, and then we go to how it affects me, and then we go to my part, right? And so some sponsors tell you to write just names, like just like write them like anybody you can think of, and don't really tell you the purpose of it. Well, my sponsor didn't tell me to do that, but I think anybody that I could even remember while I'm doing this, I wrote down, and I think I had 350 names on my first 4th step. And I love to think about it because, like, those people, I was just like burnt up at them. I love how the book talks about that, because when I would think about them, I was like, ugh, like just like that towards everyone. And that's the life that I was living. At this time, like, people that I met, I'd love them for a little bit, and then I was like, ugh, like I just resented everyone. Just this ugly person. And so I ended up living by myself after that, which things started really to go downhill bad. I totaled a few cars. I ended up getting another roommate, and I couldn't live by myself. Like, I couldn't pay my bills. I couldn't hold down a job. I worked at Walmart 3 times, and I never stayed more than 90 days. So I don't know why they kept hiring me back, but like that was my life. And so I ended up, I'm living in this house, and I'm filthy, right? Because I can't take care of myself. I was showering once every couple of weeks. And all I was doing was drinking and smoking some weed, really. Like, and some other things, but I always forget about those. But I was living in filth. Like, I always think about bugs, right? So I never liked bugs growing up. They freaked me out. And I was so filthy, though, that like ants would I'd find ants on me all the time, and I'd just be like, whoop, whoop, flick the ant off, and be crawling on my bed. And when I would look down at the floor next to my bed, it would just look like it's moving. There were so many ants. Like, I was just such a filthy person. And that's not really a requirement for drinking, but that's just where my drinking took me. And a lot of really sordid things happened. A lot of bad things happened that, you know, I don't have time to get into, and I could, but it took me to a lot of dark places. And eventually what had happened, I ended up moving back in with my parents, and I'm living in their basement, getting high with my brother all the time. And what happened was nothing really happened, actually, because it was spring break. I was still in school because, you know, I was on the 7-year plan for a bachelor's instead of the 4-year plan. And my work didn't schedule me because I wasn't reliable enough, and I called in at least once a week. And I don't know why they kept me on board. I think it's because every time I went and saw my chiropractor and I brought a doctor's note, so I'd be like, oh, I was at the doctor, see, I was hurt. And so I think that's probably why I started, but they didn't schedule me, right? And so I'm like, yes, I'm going to get to enjoy my spring break. I can drink however I want. I bought a 5th of gin, and I went home and I got drunk, and I drank it within I think it was like an hour and a half, 2 hours or something. Like, I drank a whole 5th, and I wasn't drunk, and I wanted more. And I was like, this is the problem. Like, that was the problem to me. Not the ants, not the totaling cars, like, not all these other horrible things that happened. It was like, I don't think that that's normal that I drank a 5th and didn't get drunk and wanted more. And so I Googled AA, and I found a meeting, and meetings were really hard to find. So I circled around the place like 6 times, and I don't know why. That's not me. Like, that's not something that I would do normally. So I don't know if that's a higher power thing. I really struggle with the higher power concept, but for whatever reason, I felt it was really important that I go to this meeting, and I made it, and it was real weird. And it was an 11-step meeting, which is really not my forte anyways, but you know, they didn't tell me that I couldn't drink, and I think that's really important. I think it's really important that we don't tell people they can't drink. Like, that's for you to decide. Like, that's not for me to decide. And if they'd have told me that I couldn't drink, I don't think I would have come back, because I'll tell you what I did. I went out to eat with them after the meeting because they were nice, and people and they invited me, and people weren't really wanting to hang out with me after that. But I went home and I got drunk, and that was the last good drunk I ever had. So I started going to meetings. I got a sponsor, and it was really easy for me to see that my life was unmanageable, because my life had always been unmanageable. I was this angry, ugly person. I couldn't pay my bills. I just couldn't do anything. I couldn't manage my life, right? So that was the easy part of step one, but I really struggled a lot with, can I control my drinking? Because there were times when I had gone to parties and I had controlled my drinking. There were times I went to bars and I had controlled my drinking. And for me, that was like 6 beers and driving, or not 6 beers, but like 6 liquor drinks and like driving home. Like that was a good night controlling my drinking. But the thing is, like, and it says it in the book, like we can't control and enjoy our drinking. And I certainly didn't enjoy those nights, and I was not a very fun person to be around. So what I ended up doing is I did an experiment. I poured myself a glass. It was like pretty big. I don't know if you can tell, but it's a pretty big cup, and I poured it like half booze, half mixer, and it was really gross because I hadn't been drinking for a week. And so I want to say it was like gin and Dr. Pepper or something disgusting. And while I'm pouring the drink, the thought occurred to me that probably wasn't going to be enough alcohol to know if I wanted more. Because that's all I wanted to know, is if I wanted more. So I took the bottle of tequila, because I know there was a definitely separate bottle of tequila, and I took some shots, like, squeeze it in your mouth, because that's where we were at. And so I take my drink, and I'm go to my room, and I'm reading the big book, and I'm like, taking my drink, like reading the big book. And then the thought occurred to me that probably wasn't enough to know if I wanted more to drink. This really happened. And so I went and I took a few more shots of tequila. And then before I knew it, I was drunk. And I'm really grateful for having that situation, because it really sealed the deal that I can't control my drinking, because all I had set out to do is to know if I wanted more to drink, and I ended up drunk. And I think that's a really awesome thing that happened to me. I've got a really cool life today. Working the steps has really changed my life. Doing that 4th and 5th step, I'm not that hateful person anymore. I have a hard time coming up with people that I resent, frankly. Like, people, they don't take up that space in my mind anymore, and that's truly a blessing, because like everybody would take up space in my mind, and I just was negative feelings about everything. What are some cool things about my sobriety that I should share before I shut up? I've moved a few times in sobriety, and that's kind of how I found this meeting. This meeting's really saved my ass on more than one occasion, really. Most recent, so I've moved a few times. The most recent time I was traveling, I travel a lot for work, and obviously I don't travel right now, but I travel a lot for work, and I think it'd been 2 months since I'd been to a meeting, and it was Wednesday night, and ever since I first started going to this meeting several years prior, I have a calendar reminder that pops up every Monday and Wednesday that 5D meeting's there, and it's been there for years, and I didn't come to this meeting for probably a couple of years in the interim, really. And it popped up, and I was like, oh, well, shit. It's been 2 months since I went to a meeting. I should probably go to this meeting. And I showed up, and I got a service commitment because they had a group conscience, coincidentally, that same night. And I started coming every week. And then, it's almost a year later, and I'm still coming around. And it's been such a blessing, given all these circumstances, to be able to go to these meetings right now. And to have this meeting to go to, because this was already fairly normal for me, because I would go to this meeting while I'm traveling. So I'm so grateful for this meeting today. But, I really struggled with God a lot, and I had a really long period of difficult times in my sobriety. I want to say, so I was into YPAW. We hosted Icky Paw in St. Louis. It was really awesome. I was the treasurer. It was one of the best experiences of my life, and frankly, it kept me sober because of my service commitments. There was a time when I started this meeting in the suburbs of St. Louis, where young people weren't really a thing, or they're a thing, but they weren't a thing. I don't know. And I held this meeting together with my will, because as soon as I left, it closed like 6 months later. But I was in a really dark time in my sobriety, and this was when I was dragging my feet on making amends. And I wanted to kill myself, frankly. I wanted to crash my car into a median and just die. And as silly as it sounds, the thought of, because I thought, I had a key, people were going to be waiting outside the meeting for me. Sounds crazy, right? Like it's a clubhouse. Lots of people have keys to a clubhouse, but that's the thought that crossed my mind and kept me from killing myself, frankly. And it sounds really silly to me now. It's like, well, why did I think that? But you know what? It was very beneficial at the time. Same thing when I was the treasurer for that conference. I remember sitting in the back of my home group thinking, I hope I don't go home and drink after this meeting. And like it or not, like I was pretty stubborn and I didn't go home and drink because I thought about how shitty it would be to turn over that checkbook. So my ego, I don't know if that's my ego or willpower or what. I mean, I talked to people after the meeting and I didn't want to drink, right? But I think that had a substantial piece to it, is having that service commitment, because service commitments keep me showing up when I don't want to show up. And it's so important, I think, that I got a service commitment at this meeting when I first showed up almost a year ago, because I don't know what would have happened. I was pulling apart from AA. I didn't have a sponsor because I'd moved, and it's really hard to call your old sponsor when I moved. Though, you know, the time before that when I moved, I stopped calling my sponsor. Speaking of, it's super hard to move in sobriety. Like, God bless anybody who moves in sobriety, because it is difficult and it is hard, and it's way harder than you think it's going to be. And it's really difficult to stay connected, and I can say that this meeting's been such a godsend for that. So I just want to share one more thing, one more time in my life, and then I'll shut up. After that icky paw happened, and this is where I was going, I like fell into like this massive depression, because like icky paw was everything to me. Like that host committee, I got sober, I joined a bid committee, we got the conference, we were hosting, and like that was my life. And I was so involved with it. And like the 6 months before the conference happened, because icky paw is such a big thing, like every phone call I made, everything that I was doing as part of my life, every conversation was about icky paw. And then it was just over, just like that. And so there was this huge gap in my life, and I was like super depressed. And it started this period in my sobriety where I think I was like it got better, like maybe a year or two after that. But things just weren't clicking. And I was at a YPAW once, and it was like 4 a.m, and it was me and a bunch of like past advisory council members for ICIPAW, and we were sitting around in a circle talking. And one of the guys goes, sometimes when you're in AA, like you're doing everything right and it doesn't feel like it's clicking. Like you're sponsoring people, you're working steps, you're going to meetings, you're calling your sponsor, like you're trying to be spiritual, like you're trying to do everything, and it just isn't clicking, and it's not there. And I got into this period in my life after I was depressed like that, where I don't know if I was like mildly depressed, I don't know what it was, but things weren't really clicking for me. My life was just kind of like, like it wasn't bad. My life is great, right? At the same time, like I could logically acknowledge that my life was great, but I didn't feel great. I just felt kind of like, okay. And that was good, right? Like that's good, because I felt like shit all the time before. That it was like up and down, but it just wasn't okay. And we were sitting up on this hotel on like this balcony, and he's like, the key is to just keep on doing it. Just keep on doing it, and eventually it'll pass. And I want to say it was like 3 or 4 years later, and it passed. And, I held on to that for a really long time, because I just kept on doing it, because it was, I wasn't enjoying going to meetings. I was having a hard time making friends. And this is before I even moved from St. Louis. Like I was still living in St. Louis, and I was just having a really horrible time. And it broke. And it broke in a way that I wouldn't have thought it would broke. I was having some health crises where I thought I had a heart problem. I had to wear like this heart monitor. Like all of these bad things were happening, and I felt like I was totally out of control in my life, but for whatever reason, it allowed me to give up control. And I stopped trying. I don't even know if I was trying to control everything, but I felt like I wasn't in control, and it was so relieving, which is wild, right? It's totally wild. I have a super hard time with God. I have been an atheist for several years in AA. I guess you could say I'm probably agnostic these days, which is great. But I'm not one of those people that's going to say you're going to believe in God, because like the sponsor that saved my life was an atheist. And I don't know if he's sober anymore. I have no idea, but I'm still sober, and he saved my life. And I have been an atheist for several years in sobriety, and I worked the steps. I prayed and I meditated despite being an atheist and not believing in God, and it still worked for me. So if you find yourself in one of those positions where you're struggling with God, like that's fine, because it can work for you just like it worked for me. That's 20 minutes. So that's how long I'm supposed to talk. Thank you for allowing me to speak. Good night.
Thank you, Matt. We are